Episode 95 of the award-winning Market Moves with Mark and Jeff. Two uninteresting guys talking about interesting times. Jeff, I can't help but notice your ensemble today is either a new trend or you have a team playing today as we're recording in the World Cup.
The latter is correct. Yes, I've been cheering for Argentina. I was hoping to see the U.S. maybe advance further than they did, so that was a little bit disappointing. But having spent 2 years in and around Buenos Aires in Argentina, it was, got a kind of special place in my heart for them. So it's fun to see them doing well. I mean, obviously, Messi is kind of the popular trade, as far as, one of the most well-known and kind of followed, athletes in the cup. But yeah, they play here in a couple hours, so it may or may not end up being a happy day when it's all said and done, Mark. But I'm cheering for them one way or the other.
One of the great joys, Jeff, of parenting for me is that my 10-year-old, who's deeply into sports, and I in it with him, I think on a lot of levels looked at a lot of sports and kind of following them as like just not something an adult has time to do. And I think I was internally a little sad about that. And he revived the paying attention and the watching. I'm sure there's an eye roll from the group that says this is a meaningless, mindless things to follow. But we recorded the Spain and France game, and my two sons' two favorite teams, and we watched every second of it. It was a blast. So good luck to Argentina today. I think I'm pulling for the UK. They've been pretty fun to root for, and I like Harry Kane and Bellingham. So we'll see what happens.
Well, it's a good thing we're not in the same room then. At least it won't end in blows one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's World Cup's been a blast. It seems like the U.S. has done a really good job hosting. Well, all the North America, Central America have done just North America, I guess, have done a great job of hosting. It would seem to me, and kind of sad it's coming to an end.
Yeah, it is a bummer. It feels like, like March Madness or anything that you get into, there's a tournament, it whittles down, and then it comes to an end, and you just don't have that, series of games to look forward to. So fun to see it conclude. And it has brought a lot of people in, and been interesting to see on social media a lot of comments about people generally pleasantly surprised, having good experiences being here. I think maybe expecting everybody to be like the president of the United States, kind of brash and not welcoming of foreigners. But it's been fun to see a lot of positive feedback come out of that.
Yeah, very good, Jeff. Well, we're recording this a day earlier than normal for a number of reasons, but one of those reasons is that I'm 47 here, and I guess now 2 years delayed on getting this uncomfortable preventative procedure, colonoscopy, done, which is scheduled for Friday. And I thought that I would just take a second to, I think about these things a lot for I don't know what reasons, honestly. Just kind of interesting, I think, to think about the tech and what all is out there. Definitely think about preventing things that are preventable. And, there's so much that seems to get worse, left unknown in the body one way or another. And we could just check on a lot of this stuff. And I don't think this is very familiar to a lot of folks. So I thought I'd just take a second to list and talk about the four things that I've done so far. I will be doing more for sure. The colonoscopy is the one that most know about. I think they now recommend at 45. Most insurance carriers cover it at that age. Used to be 50. So the guy that I am seeing said, "Hey, you're actually 3 years early from the guideline that was just changed." So way to get in. My pharmacist giving me the cocktail you have to drink beforehand said that she's been putting it off for 5 years because of the taste of this cocktail. So I don't know that taste just yet, but its reputation has preceded it. So I understand it's not a lot of fun. So a couple of other things that I have done. This calcium CT scan, which I think is not covered by insurance, is $150. Non-invasive at all, just some quick pictures, essentially. Kind of detects whether there's any calcium within your arteries, kind of general cardiovascular system. And you either have none, a little bit, or a lot. And there are different preventative measures you can go take from there, but I think can be a really good glimpse into what problems could be brewing in the body as it relates to heart attacks, which we know are awful and sudden and all that sort of stuff. So I have done that. I don't know all that much about it, except that I went through the process and it was fairly uninvasive, and it seems like it's a pretty good preventative check on the cardiovascular system. So I just kind of wanted to say that I am obviously not a doctor, appraiser or something, but I'll stop there, Jeff. I don't know if you've got any comments on that or the colonoscopy. I don't know if you've done it.
I'm not very far behind you, Mark, so I haven't yet. As I think about it, though, I really missed an opportunity. We should be recording tomorrow once you've started the cocktail. I think it would be a lot of fun to see how long you could make it through the episode before like bailing in a panic, off camera. So yeah, opportunity missed on that front. But it's fascinating just what's available to us, in technology. We went and saw the movie Young Washington last night with our daughters, and a lot of battle scenes, and we, for whatever reason, on the way home, we're talking about healthcare and just the quality of life generally between healthcare, technology, the way that we live today versus even the wealthiest people a couple hundred years ago. It's just fascinating. They didn't even know what was going on, why they were coughing up blood and having all these issues, and here we can look relatively so much further into the future. So I'm not very far behind you, I'm afraid, on having to get that done. Anything that was helpful out of that CT scan that came through, or have you seen results on that?
Yeah, I have. I did it probably about 6 months ago. I think the doctors were looking at me sort of cross-eyed, like, why are you doing this? You seem like you're in shape. Nobody's asked you to do it. In fact, I didn't have a referral, so that was a little bit complicated to try and set it up. And I think I had no presence of calcium, which is great. I think awesome. Maybe 50% of the people that take these scans, that's the conclusion. So that's really good. It did measure the thickness or width of my arteries, and one in particular is 40 or 50% larger than is normal or is expected. And it suggested that I follow up and do a dye test, which I have not done yet, but I plan to do. And I think these are different threads that, either doing this preventative measures make you could look at it like, hey, you're just creating reason for the medical community to order more services and kind of use you as a lab rat and just run up the bill. But I think these things for me are like, man, let's go explore this. I didn't know this about myself, of course. And, if there is some increased risk of aneurysm, I think, on some level, in a way. So I'm going to look at that. And I thought that was pretty notable. It wasn't urgent in any way, but said, hey, you could do this. And so I will follow that up.
That makes sense. Well, the cost on a relative basis is so much less, a $100, $150 scan to know, even if it's that, hey, that's not a risk factor for me. Great. You know what else to focus on. So it's always inconvenient to go and schedule and do these things in the short term, but the knowledge and the access to information that we have now is so much better. It sure makes sense to me to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So Jeff, just quickly, the other two things that I've done is the pre-Nuvo scan. I did the executive version. This one is far less financially accessible. It's a lot of money. I mean, it was like $2,500. I had HSA dollars to use towards it. And this is a full body MRI. You're sitting in an MRI tube for 45 minutes. They have a nice Netflix picture in the MRI machine. And, but it's a full body MRI, and it's the same sort of thing. It's just a full scan, seeing all sorts of interesting things, noting, some disc degeneration, some knee degeneration, some nasal cavity cysts that are benign and not anything to be concerned of, that they say. Nothing that was a follow-up on, as best I could tell. And they're saying, hey, 5-10 years, you can go a long time without doing this again if you wanted. But boy, was that a fascinating look at the body and a look at medicine and where all of this has gotten to. So that was a blast. So if anybody's interested in those sorts of things and hasn't done it, I would certainly advise it. There's a little bit of mental taxation, I guess. I don't know the best way to describe it. Like going through these sorts of things. Well, what if it finds something and, it'd be better not to know maybe or whatever. But I don't experience that. It's just, the curiosity is what kind of reigns supreme in my mind. And then this function health, which I have not done yet, but it is 160 different blood tests. And the thought is to do it twice a year forever. It's like $300 a year, $225 a year, whatever it is. And it's just kind of keeping data in a trend of data so that you know a lot. So those are the 4 things that I've been doing, Jeff. This is a very small like megaphone or platform that we have, but if someone like you or my pharmacist hasn't done the colonoscopy, maybe this is the nudge you needed to go get it done. So I just thought I'd say it. And boy, I'm sure all listening to this, I'm sure we don't have a whole lot of young listeners, but I have so many friends and colleagues and family members that are going through or have gone through major health issues, almost all of which would the care for those would have been less life altering had they been detected, the problems been detected far earlier. And, I think I'm really operating in a fear of working with something that I could have found earlier and just didn't. I think that's really what drives me more than anything, in addition to the curiosity of like modern medicine. So, so I don't know, Jeff, I just thought I'd mention it. I didn't want to go for 10 or 11 minutes here, but that's what I did. I'm sorry for that.
Well, no worries. I think it is valuable and interesting. Your concluding thought on that is I'm got a funeral for my wife's uncle on Monday that I'll be attending. Out of the blue, discovered had stage 4 cancer, and a month later was gone. I think he was early 70s, age-wise, but just these things can be there and just not even know. The cost for most of these is not that expensive, and I mean relative to more late-stage cancer treatments, even the $2,500 one. If you've got HSA dollars or some way to plan for it. Knowledge is always helpful in these things, and when something's not right and you don't know what's going on, that's almost one of the worst parts of any medical diagnosis and experience. So fascinating to hear what you've gone through. I'm probably pretty quick on your heels on all of those.
Awesome. Yeah, we'd love to hear your experiences as you go through, and any developments from this I'll certainly pass on, like if there's something else useful that I learned during the process. So yeah, good. Well, thanks for letting me talk about that. Now I think we can go to the financial colonoscopy that is inflation and the general market. Jeff, how's that for a segue? We've gotten really good news. Now, it's important, I think, to it certainly is in my subconscious as I'm reading all of this great inflation news that we've gotten. It's all May data or June data. And how much has the world changed in 15 days? We're bombing Iran again, and there's now another deal on the table that someone's asking for, and all this sort of silliness. So, I think energy prices have already gone up on some level, although not as much. But with that context, we have some really good CPI data. We have market and Fed reserves kind of muted reaction, but reaction nonetheless. Kind of see how they're taking in this data and working through it all. Yeah, so I think we don't want to talk a lot about inflation and rates. If there is a sure thing to get even lower viewership than we get, Jeff, it is spending too much time talking about this. But I do think it's important to keep track of it. And then specifically, we have been maybe not we. Don't want to put words in your mouth. I have been counter mainstream that not only do I think we won't see a rate hike this year, that we might actually see a drop before the end of the year. I'm prepared to have egg on my face with that thought, but it's an interesting take right now in light of all that's going on.
Well, I'm excited to see which drives more views, your colonoscopy or inflation data, topics that we're talking about here, Mark. But it's I'm grateful that we're at least seeing some data that's moving in the right direction with the CPI. This last week, we had the latest print came out. I'll share maybe a chart or two that we've got just to kind of illustrate what's happening there at the risk of maybe overdoing the topic. But in May, it had gone up on a year-over-year basis. So it was over 4% on an annualized basis. Was dropped in the June read, down into 3.4%. I think was the headline number. And now, the context against that is, there had been a ceasefire in the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices were down significantly. Unfortunately, that's ramping back up, as far as escalation of tensions there. And oil prices have started to follow that track as well. So it's just, and you made a comment, as they had the agreement, kind of in place for the ceasefire and thinking they had a peace deal in place, that who knows what tomorrow will bring. And that turned out to be pretty, prescient timing on your part, because it was very short-lived. Hopefully we can get back to that sooner than later, but these things have such ripple effects in a global economy that it's frustrating on the one hand, but it's the reality that we have to deal with and analyze on the other.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what the last 30 days are telling us, Jeff, is that inflation ramping back up is a concern. Nobody wants that, but it is proof that it's transitory and that it's just energy related as it comes to this conflict and kind of 20% of the supply of oil being disrupted in this great unknown. And so we're seeing a number of things, and we'll talk a little bit more about some other markers that have looked pretty good here. But what's really notable is that the market's expectation of inflation is taming, down the road here. So yeah, sure, we may be back in conflict with Iran. The U.S. is foreshadowing a taking over of the Strait of Hormuz. There's stories about a pipeline kind of skipping the Strait of Hormuz. Whether I don't know if anybody should believe that or not, but it does seem like the world markets believe that there is more stability down the road here, no matter the conflict status. And I think that's helping. And if energy is under control, we're going to see inflation come down whenever energy is, the supply of energy is undisrupted. And so I'm sure some major events can change that stability, your perspective of stability. But 3.5% is where we need to be heading to on overall CPI. But we've got core inflation, we've got PPI, the Producers Price Index. These things are really, really looking good.
Yeah, exactly. And when those are trending the right direction, I mean, they can be a bit of a leading indicator as far as where we're going on the producer side. If the production costs are going down, or at least not escalating as quickly, that does tend to translate into consumer prices, which then filter into the CPI and the PCE measurements that that the Fed really focuses on. And great to see that those are heading the right direction as well. Any other thoughts on that? And Kevin Warsh had made some comments about their commitment to getting all the way down to the 2% target that we can review in a minute. But anything else that stood out to you on this one, Mark?
Well, excluding food and fuel are pretty volatile ones right now. I mean, I've been in a couple of restaurants with my family over the last 2 weeks, and I've actually sat down surprised by the affordability of the meals. I think some of this may be strategy to compete with the restaurant friend of the show, Chili's, and Applebee's and these other places that are doing these meals that are often cheaper than fast food. So maybe there's some strategy in it, but it was a strategy unable to be employed by many, as you saw prices going up, and I think an assessment that the environment to lift prices was just everybody has expected that you would have to raise prices, and so they just did that into the expectation. Fuel costs, of course, are all over the place here with whatever is happening with Iran. But as we said, I think, do we go to $200 a barrel? That doesn't feel like a very likely, of the many possible outcomes, it doesn't feel like a very likely outcome.
Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, something could change tomorrow that changes the outlook, but that doesn't seem to be the market's expectation generally. And so, unless something changes in that direction, that is going, I think, where you would want it to. And there are few things that are more impactful, I think, on the consumer psyche than driving down the street and just seeing gas prices today being higher than they were yesterday. And it just has a psychological impact, I think, that kind of ripples throughout the market. And on the other side, on the way down, I think that there's, a psychological confidence that starts to come back as you see prices, coming down at the pump. And so it's always been fascinating to me just how prevalent that is. You can't help but pay attention to what they are, even if you're driving a Tesla around.
We have been talking about this a lot. We have been trying to highlight Warsh's comments towards this effect. I've seen Kathy Wood, the hedge fund manager at ARK Invest, who I kind of like to listen to because it itself is a counter perspective based on history, and just talking about the inversion of the 10-year and the 2-year, and the deep deflationary potential of this AI kind of rollout as it affects everything, and we're already kind of deep into it. And I think some of this makes me feel that because we got a lot of inflationary pressures all around us, clearly, but yet it's not out of control. Yet the market is not going nuts with expectation of rampant inflation. And so, there's just a lot of cross currents. Hard to know, what the end result of the flow of the water is with all the cross currents coming in. But it's just a lot to read. And I think there is reason to not just look at the traditional data points and say, hey, we are on to rate hikes.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I'll just show real quick, one of the things that I think is providing some stability and I think an expectation of what is to come is, the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, is pretty consistently beating this drum of, hey, we're going to get inflation to our target, while considering should there be other ways of measuring inflation? Are we even measuring the right things? Are we using or missing out on technologies that could allow us to measure in real time versus these surveys that are always backward looking? In recent comments that he said that he had, I thought this quote was interesting, Mark. He said, there might be some that look at this morning's data and say, oh, mission accomplished, everything is swell. That's not my view. He's saying this isn't the time for us to pass the buck to others. The Federal Reserve can and will deliver price stability, meaning getting back to and holding at that 2% interest rate or inflation rate target. As we get there, I think that provides the stability that a lot are looking for. I think that's a net positive on interest rates in the long term, and that will spur economic activity. I mean, we see that the rates don't have to come down very much before you have a lot of people come off the sidelines and start to refinance and purchase. It just speaks to the affordability issue that's out there. And in the short term, and for them to get all the way to their target, that they may hold off on the cuts that they expect to, at least that he is expected to be making. He definitely has a fundamental belief that artificial intelligence is going to drive productivity and drive, deflationary effects, in at least certain segments of the economy. So I think there are good things to come. What will it look like to get there? Probably going to be bumpier than any of us would like, but he's at least pretty consistent in the focus on where they want to get, and then from there, starting to make decisions. They've got a bunch of task forces that they've spun up that friend of the pod, Frank, has shared with us. I think that they're trying to modernize what they've been doing and historically, while preserving the stability that everybody in the market really needs.
Yeah. So, Jeff, just quickly before I get to that, the producers price index was down month over month, 3%. I forget off the top of my head what the expectation was. It was certainly not to be down. And, the producers price index, I think, is kind of the business side of inflation. Is that the right way to describe that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think those that are producing what ultimately gets consumed, and if the cost, if the input costs go down on the production side, the expectation is that the end price to the consumer, should follow suit.
So all aspects of the economy has seen some relief in lower than expectation inflation prints. We'll see what happens here as July is read, and we have this disruption in the Middle East. So we just got to see what happens there. But one thing that I've got to say, probably pretty obvious if you listen to this podcast, is for all the potential hits as it would relate to Trump. One thing that I see a lot of is action, and like productive action one way or another. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it would be right to extrapolate the Federal Reserve, their most recent actions to Trump. I mean, he nominated Warsh, but maybe that's just the extent of it. But we have talked on this podcast for 18 plus months about just not really knowing, having a lot of confidence in the data that is being used to make these decisions. There certainly is a lot of talk about how out of date it is, how small the samples. I think we were talking kind of at length, maybe even with a guest, about the actual process of surveying businesses. It's like individuals calling 400 companies once a month, only getting 125 of them, and that is jobs data. It's just this very archaic manual analog process that doesn't match the technology of today. And so just one example, but you do see a lot in and around this administration of folks that are biased towards action, I like that, and so what we have here, Jeff, is a Federal Reserve task force that has been assembled. I think it is fun to see some of the names, not all, but the Xbox CEO from Microsoft is on one of these task force. Mark Andreessen, one of you and I's favorite interviewees out there, one of these venture capitalists, kind of all-knower types that seems really sharp and well-meaning. I think there's another former CEO, I think of Walmart, that is on this, and then it's just a whole list of those you would expect, or PhD professors from all the leading institutions, Harvard and Chicago and all these sorts of places. And but there is a task force to look at a number of things. The general goal, straightforward, ensure the Fed is best positioned to achieve our objectives in this consequential time. Good. Just review your systems and processes. That makes sense. And there's 5 areas where they've assembled these kind of super smart folks to really get to the bottom of this. Communications, review how the Fed conveys policy deliberations, decisions, et cetera. I think this one's something we've talked about and really good. Like, should we be hanging on every sentence and literally the single word chosen within a sentence? And this can make the market move a ton. And it's been more the case over the last 3-4 years than ever before. That can't be healthy. So how is all of this communicated? Balance sheet policy, examining the cost, benefits, institutional implications of the Fed's current balance sheet. Number 3 is data. Improve the quality and timeliness of real economic signals that inform the Fed. I've been asking questions about trueflation. This sort of, I think, a more thoughtful read, may not be reliable in the way that the Fed needs. I'm certainly leaving room for that, but it is someone that's thought about it and has a pretty wide net that they cast to get real-time data. So looking at that, productivity and jobs, assess the economic impact of new general purpose technologies, including AI, to inform the Fed. And then inflation frameworks. I think this is kind of dealing with the question, Jeff, of, okay, we say we want 2% inflation. Why? Well, when that question has been asked of previous Feds, they basically point back to some World War II, the country of Hungary decision that 2% was the inflation target they were reaching. And everybody's just kind of used that. It's become an axiom. So, I thought this was interesting and worthwhile to cover. It feels like bias towards action. Let's just review. Maybe what they're doing is the right thing. I would hope that every group would do something like this every couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. It will be very interesting to see what comes out of it, Mark. I did listen to the first full interview that Kevin Warsh did after their first meeting where he was the chair. And, he specified these are 5 separate and distinct task forces. I don't know if I'm using the correct literary version of that, but and so, these impressive individuals are focused on each of those topics. And I agree. I think it will lead to some meaningful action that will come out of it. I can relate a little bit to this. I've been served on and am serving on a couple of different task forces that with the Appraisal Foundation. And, there's something about bringing people together with a different set of perspectives and kind of strengths and weaknesses to try to really get at the heart of something. Are we going the right direction? Is there a better way to do any one of these things, from communication to measuring to what is it are we measuring in the first place? So I think there will be a bias for action. I think that it can lead to things like not having 90-day revisions of jobs data because our survey, we got more answers back, for the 2-month prior period. And so the numbers get revised up or down or whatever direction. If we have real-time data with the technology that is certainly capable of facilitating that, it just requires that you build the process to collect it in real time, in a way that works. And so, just as one example, but I think we will see some meaningful changes coming out of there in the next 12 months. One of the recurring themes that we've, generally had is stability leads to investment, leads to action within the economy. And my hope is that, the outcome will be greater stability and greater reliance on the data that the Fed has, the way they communicate it and analyze it, that will lead to improved investment and I think confidence in what's happening, and less of the volatile, what did the Fed chairman say this month versus last month, and what word did he use, and how did he temper it, to try to understand. Warsh is trying to put that back on the investors and say, you guys read the data, and we're not going to try to dictate to you what you should be thinking about the data.
Which is an interesting note too. Warsh has tried to be, he does not want everyone hanging on his words. He does not want to announce what he's going to do in the future. The market tries to price all that crap in, and then he's too influential in the market. But then you've got these governors. Waller in particular has been pretty vocal here recently about wanting rate hikes. I think from my counter perspective, that rate hikes won't happen, and maybe even a rate drop will happen. It's not been a good 2 weeks for my perspective. I think the rate hikes have looked pretty likely given the players on the field and the conditions on the field. But we know that the decision to raise rates is not being made in the last 2 weeks. It's going to be made at some point in the future, not just with the data that was presented last week, but a lot more. And so I think we got a long ways to go there. So I think I could be safe in the counter prediction.
Time will tell one way or the other. It's fascinating to have access to resources like, Kalshi and Polymarket and others, where people are actually putting money behind what they think is going to happen. It's just an interesting way to leverage the wisdom of the crowds. Always fun to see where those things are suggesting, what's likely to happen, whether it's an Argentina soccer game, or will the Fed cut or increase rates, and on what timetable and that sort of thing. The consensus view more often than not seems to be right in those situations.
You bet. Well, Jeff, just a couple more items to hit on here. We don't talk a lot about foreclosures on our podcast, largely because they just ain't around to the degree that is meaningful or needle moving. But I did see that from 2024 to 2025, foreclosure listings were up something like 14%. We do have a list as of June of this year, the top markets with foreclosures. Lake Charles and Tuscaloosa and Dayton. These are not large markets, so maybe it is a little less of a statement that 10% of listings in Lake Charles, Louisiana, are foreclosures. That is pretty darn surprising to me. I think these are signals that the moratorium on foreclosing, plus the masking that market conditions, just low interest rates and huge price appreciation, was saving folks in trouble. But more so, I think the lack of appetite to pursue foreclosure, both from presidential administrations and beyond. I think that sort of stuff is all loosening to allow foreclosures to take place at a little bit higher level. So I think it's interesting to observe. On some level, I wondered if we would be seeing a rise of foreclosures in the same way. We see a few in our firm here and there, not a ton. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think if anything, maybe a modest pickup in what, at least what I'm observing anecdotally, as far as it's been forever since I've even seen short sale listings, foreclosure listings or sales in the market. And it's not an avalanche by any means, but to even see some of those starting to crop up is a sign, I think, of, where this data is leading to. They're in 6 states are where these top 10, markets are. You mentioned Lake Charles has 10% of the listings or foreclosures. The lowest is Mobile, Alabama at about 5%. And so anywhere in between there, Louisiana, Alabama, Ohio, Pennsylvania, then a little one-off in California, it looks like, and maybe Iowa. But it's not a big avalanche in the moment. I think for me, the noteworthy thing was just, hey, they're starting to increase, in a few of these markets. And I've seen a few here and there where I hadn't seen any for a really long time. I'm not predicting a massive trend in the moment, but frankly, in normal times, there have been a certain level of foreclosures and short sales, taking place. You don't necessarily want that for people, but that at least homes are being disposed of that way is consistent with historic trends. And I think what happens when values aren't just going up rapidly, because when your home is always worth more than what you paid for it a year or two ago, if you get into personal financial trouble, you don't have any trouble selling it, paying off everything, and then moving on. And I think this is also an indication that values haven't been increasing, and especially in those markets, the way that they were, through COVID and, maybe up through the last year or two.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been 2 years, but that I've had this conversation with like a large private equity firm that had acquired some servicers and was having to deal with some distressed loans. And I remember the stories at the time where there were regulatory stakeholders. Whether it was GSEs or not, I don't recall, but whoever it was saying that, hey, look, if you're going to pursue a troubled loan, I need to see the whole file. We need to look at it. And, that just was a non-starter for them. Well, look, the last thing I want is anybody digging into my files and all that. And so, they were trying to innovate workout solutions. Hey, you got a lot of equity built in the home. It's a distressed loan. Maybe you can live there for 12 months for free. And then we get the house after 12 months, but you get a portion of the equity, whatever it is. And just trying to negotiate some way to deal with it without calling it and going through the typical foreclosure process. So I think now, the possibility of foreclosure is back on the table on some level. So it's part of the reason why we're seeing some of these. And I don't love that for the homeowners, obviously, but I do think that is a necessary and maybe a necessary component of a healthy market.
You bet. When there's lots of equity, it's easy to get creative with the solutions. When there's not, or when values are coming down, that's when it becomes kind of a self-enforcing spiral. And we're not there in the moment, but we have seen a little bit of modest price softening in some markets. And if that continues, it could lead to more foreclosures. So it's all, part of the market dynamics, the way that they interplay together.
You bet. Well, there it is, Jeff. Episode 95 of Market Moves. We are trying to make an effort where possible to shorten the length of the episode so everybody can get our thoughts in a little bit more condensed version. So we'll see how that format works. I think we've accomplished that here. Wish me luck this week. I wish you and your team luck this afternoon. Hopefully, by the time everybody's listening to this, we're both on the right side of the hopes.
Yeah. We hope so anyway. I will be fine whether Argentina wins or not. Hopefully you're fine, regardless of how things play out. But fun to be looking at some of the health options that are out there. Fun to be analyzing what's happening in the world. So good time as always.
Till next time.